Hey, welcome back to the channel. So recently I've received a few comments on a couple of my videos I've made in the past asking about back button focus, why I use it on my cameras and such. So I thought I would make a dedicated video tackling that topic. Now I've made videos in the past that there were more setup videos talking about how to set up back button focus. Like I made one for the Nikon Z9, and I also included it in my X100VI, the Fuji X100VI video I made. I'll put links above and down below so you can check it out. But I haven't really made one dedicated specifically to just kind of like a general overview of what back button focus is. So that's what this video is going to be about. We'll talk about the, what it is, why I like it, the pros and the cons that I've found through the years. And at the end, I'll kind of give you a general overview on how to set it up on your camera. Now, this video is geared for like beginners. So if you're a seasoned professional with back button focus or you don't like it at all, maybe let us know down in the comments the pros and cons that you found using it, and that way we can all learn from each other. So that's enough of me rambling. Let's go ahead and dive into understanding back button focus. Okay, so what is back button focus? Well, first of all, let's talk about the shutter button. The shutter button on your camera, when you first get it, it's going to do three things. When you half press, it's going to activate the metering system for the camera to get your exposure. It also activates autofocus at that time. And then when you fully press it, it takes the photo. Now, what we do with back button focus is we disable focus on the shutter button and we move it to another button on the camera. Typically it's on the back, hence the name. And I like to have a button that is near my thumb where it's within easy reach when I'm gripping the camera. But technically you could have any button on your camera set up as focus as long as the manufacturer allows it. So I've been using back button focus on my cameras for a long time now, and what I've found is that I have more control over my autofocus system and I get more keepers in the end. I have less missed shots than I did before. So that's kind of the what it is, a little bit about why I've switched. But now let's talk about some of the pros that I've identified over the years. Okay, so some of the pros of back button focus that I've found throughout the years, and this is the biggest one, and it kind of, a lot of times I'll hear people, not list off a bunch of pros, and it always, they kind of all tie into this one. And that's the ability to switch between autofocus continuous and single point autofocus and manual focus in an instant. You don't have to make any switches back here. You don't have to dive into a menu. It all is based on how you use or don't use the program button on the back of your camera for focusing. So for example, let's just say I'm photographing sports or wildlife, some fast moving subject. I would want my autofocus mode to be in continuous autofocus. So the way I would do that is I would put my frame, my focus frame or my focus point on my subject. I would press and hold the button that I programmed, and I would just keep that focus point on my subject, and it's going to continuously focus on it. Or I could use like a subject detection mode and have a little bit bigger box, focus box, and then as long as I keep my subject within that box, it's going to maintain focus. So I can just track my subject, and then when I see the action I want to capture, I just press my shutter button. Okay, so with continuous autofocus, that's how you manage, that's how you would do it with back button focus, and it works great. With single point autofocus, that I use a mode like that when I'm shooting landscapes or you know, still life or macro or something like that. So to use back button focus like it's in single point, it's pretty straightforward. So what you would do is you would, you know, frame up your shot. You would put your focus point where you want to have your critical focus. You would press your program button just once and then release it, and then go in and check your focus to make sure it's sharp. And then all you have to do is trip the shutter button and you got your shot. But it makes it really simple. So I could be in continuous mode by pressing and holding that button down, or I could be in single point by focusing, you know, pressing the button once, waiting until the box turns green or whatever it does in your camera, and then releasing it. And now my focus is set. And now all I have to do is trip the shutter button. I don't want to press that button again unless I want to refocus, right? On older cameras like the F5 and some of the older DSLRs, they have fewer focus points like we do in today's modern cameras. So like the F5 only has 5 focus points. So when you were using an older camera, you have to focus and then recompose. And so I would put my focus point on my subject, I would press the AF on button on the back of my camera, focus on my subject, release it, recompose, and then trip the shutter button and to take the shot. All right, and then the last mode would be manual focus, and in that case, I don't even press this button at all. So all I do is I put my frame on the subject or on the part of my landscape image that I want sharp, and I zoom in and I adjust my focus ring, and then I just trip the shutter. I don't want to press this button right here because that will activate autofocus. So that's it. That is the biggest advantage that I have found, is the ability to switch between continuous and single point and manual focus just seamlessly, and it just makes it really easy. Okay, so this next pro or benefit, whatever you want to call it, kind of came to me on a recent trip. I was up in Vancouver Island. I was photographing a lot of water features. So I wanted a longer shutter speed, so I would have stacked neutral density filters. And I was thinking about making this video, and I was trying to come up with some of the pros and the cons. And really this one is kind of tied to what we've already talked about, that first pro. But what I realized is that my workflow when I'm shooting with filters is a whole heck of a lot easier and simpler than it was before when I had focus linked to my shutter button. So before, when I was shooting, you know, you would first have all your filters off, or at least all your neutral density filters off, and then you would put your focus point over your subject. You would press your shutter button halfway so that it focuses, and then you have to turn off your autofocus completely. So that would be either in a menu, or some cameras have a switch that you can flip on the side of your camera to turn it off. So whatever the case may be, you actually have to turn off the autofocus system. And then you would stack your filters, adjust your exposure, and snap the picture. Now, if you wanted to then, you know, focus somewhere else, then you'd have to turn your autofocus system back on and go through that whole thing again. So that's, you know, takes some time. With back button focus setup, it's a whole lot easier. So all you do, you frame up your shot, you put your focus point where you want to focus, you press the AF on button or whatever button you've programmed once until it turns green, your focus point turns green, and then you release it. And then of course you want to go in and check to make sure that you got good focus. Then you put your neutral density filters on, adjust your exposure, and then snap the picture. Now, if you want to focus again, you have to pull your neutral density filters off because they're usually too dense for the autofocus system to focus properly. And then go ahead and refocus, but you don't have to go in and you don't have to switch autofocus on and off all the time. So it kind of just makes your life a little bit easier. It's the small things in life. And that one's kind of tied to what we've already talked about before. So those are the pros that I've that have kept me using back button focus from the F5 to the GR3X to my Z8 and my Z9. So now that we've talked about the pros, let's talk about some of the cons. Okay, so real quick before we get into the cons, if this video is helping you out, please give it a thumbs up. Hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more videos on setting up your camera and stuff like that. All right, so let's talk about the cons now. Now, you can probably tell from the pros that, and the fact that I've been using this for, a long time, that there's probably not any cons that's going to keep me from using back button focus, at least that I can, that I've found so far. So with that said, one of the cons that you will experience, and everybody does this, is it takes a little bit of a learning curve to develop the muscle memory to use another button for focus, especially during critical events where, you're kind of stressed and you're wanting to get this shot and you're not quite used to it. It's easy to kind of miss shots during that. You might forget to press the button, or perhaps you keep holding the button and you move your focus point or your subject out of the box, and the camera refocuses on something else and you miss some shots. So that is going to happen to everyone until you develop the muscle memory to use both buttons together, to work harmoniously, essentially. And you will get to that point, but it's going to require, it's going to require a lot of practice. So don't watch this video and then go to your child's championship football game and make the switch then. I would recommend practicing this on something that is not as critical, and then work it into the more important events. But yeah, there's definitely a learning curve, and it takes practice in it to develop that muscle memory. So that's number one. Number two has burned me many times, and so I'm going to try, hopefully I can find one of the photos where I usually delete them where this happens, but hopefully I can find, and I'll put it up, one of the photos that kind of got me thinking to how can I combat this issue? All right, so what it is if I ever want to be in the photo, I need to hand my camera off to somebody else. And this typically is only when I'm photographing, when I'm out with my family. I'm not like photographing an event or out shooting landscapes. If I'm out with landscapes and I hand it to another photographer, they're probably using back button focus too. And so they know how to do it if I want somebody to take a photo of me. But if I'm out with my family and I want a waiter to take a picture of us at the dinner table, and I hand my camera off to him and I'm trying to explain how back button focus works. Well, number one was the fact that there's a learning curve, and this person's not going to be able to master that learning curve in a split second. So more often than not, my images that I get back when I'm reviewing them, we're completely out of focus. The focus box is up in the corner, and it's a mess. So now typically I don't have this camera with me if I'm going out with my family. I'll typically have my GR3X or my X100VI, much smaller camera. This one, the GR3X, is actually it's pocketable. It's great. It's a great camera, and the output of this is amazing. So I highly recommend it. I might do a review on it at some point. But this is the camera I typically have out on those occasions. And like I said, I've got this set up with back button focus as well, but what I also do, so the cameras that I'm going to be carrying with me on events when I'm out with my family that, I want to get some snapshots. What I'll do is I'll program a mode. So on the Ricoh, we have these user modes up here. I don't know if you can see them. It's like U1, 2, and 3. And then within the menu, you can like assign different functions to those 3. So I think there's like 6 custom, essentially like banks like the Nikon has, that you can customize the camera, and then you can apply those 6 to 3 of these user modes on this dial. So you can change things around as you want. So one of those banks I've got set up to where the shutter button works like it does from the factory. Okay, so it actually focuses. So if I'm in a scenario where I need to hand the camera off to somebody else that's not used to back button focus, I'll just go ahead and set it to one of those, that user mode that I've programmed, and then now when they're shooting the photo, it works just like every other camera that they've ever handled, right? So I've found that now I'm getting much better keepers in those scenarios. So that's it. Those are the 2 drawbacks. So now let's dive into how to set this up on your camera. Okay, so we've talked about what back button focus is. I've given you some pros and cons that I've found throughout the years using back button focus. Now let's just talk about kind of like a general setup guide for getting it set up on your camera. Now, the specifics will be different from camera to camera, but hopefully this will kind of give you a starting point of what to look for in the menu. And I would highly suggest doing a search on YouTube and seeing if there's a setup video for your model of camera. I know I've made one for the Nikon Z9 and the Z8, as well as the X100VI. So hopefully there's one out there for your brand. Okay, so there's 3 things that we need to change on the camera, and it doesn't matter the order that you change them. And by the way, I'll put a graphic at the end that kind of walks you through all 3 items. The first thing we need to change though is the shutter button, and we need to make sure that we disable autofocus for the shutter button. So to do that, you're going to have to get into your menu and find the setting that changes that. The second item that needs to be changed is we need to customize one of the buttons on the camera to activate autofocus. And so if you're a Nikon shooter, that's already done with the AF on button. Or if you're on another camera that doesn't have an AF on button, you'll have to program one of the function buttons to do that. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be on the back of the camera. It just should be comfortable and intuitive for you, so that it makes it easy. The third thing is we have to set the baseline focus mode on your camera, and that should be set to autofocus continuous. Now for the Nikons, the way you do that is there's a button on the side, and then you rotate a command dial, and you can switch between autofocus continuous to single point to manual, okay? You can also do it within a menu as well. So every camera is a little bit different. So hopefully this has helped you out. If it did, please, again, give it a like, subscribe to the channel. All of these things help out the channel so that YouTube pushes it out to other people. If you're interested in setting up back button focus for a Nikon Z8 or Z9, check out the video linked above, or if you're an X100VI shooter, check out this other video, and I will see you next time.